What's going on, guys? Welcome back. For those of you that don't know me, my name is Stephen Keeney, and I run a small martial arts and boxing channel here on YouTube. What I want to get into today is I want to bring to you guys the benefits of doing solo boxing training. Now, there's a lot of new school methods that involve obviously needing a second person, the pad work, the partner drills, and all that good stuff. And that's all very conducive to making you into a much better boxer and fighter. However, I think that a lot of the old school training methods have been sort of forgotten about, or people just on average put a lot less stock into them. I see a lot of different channels on YouTube of boxing trainers giving their personal opinion, and it seems like the consensus is that most people will just use shadow boxing normally as a warm-up and also jump roping normally as a warm-up. And I rarely see people using the double M bag for more than just kind of putting it and just kind of warming up and staying active with it. But there's a lot more to these methods that meets the eye. There's a lot of value that people don't place in these methods because truthfully, they're not really using them the right way. So I want to explain to you guys what I mean by that. So starting out with just the heavy bag, right? Now, obviously, the good thing about the heavy bag is that you can use it anytime you want. And it's something that's very simple to use for beginners. But a lot of times as people get more advanced, they don't really bring their own mind into it and use the heavy bag for much more advanced tactics. You see, the heavy bag is like the one thing that you kind of have to bring your own self into it in order to make things happen. It's not like the mitt work where you can just have somebody feeding you different combinations or presenting you with different obstacles like slipping and weaving. And you have to remember that a lot of the great fighters that we still celebrate today, their careers predate the implementation of focus mitts. And they use heavy bags. So there has to be something to it, right? You have to almost imagine that if they didn't have the focus mitts back then, technically speaking, they didn't really need them. However, the heavy bag was something they used. So if you were to strip them of the heavy bag, it probably would have been a huge part of their training that they now don't have. I mean, imagine training boxing with just sparring and just shadow boxing. It's probably doable, but it probably helps to have an object to hit, right? So when you're training on a heavy bag, what you don't want to do is just stand in front of it and just throw punches. Now, that's okay if you're repping out a certain punch or a maneuver and you want to get good reps in for practice. But if you're freestyling the bag, you want to respect it as if it were an opponent. Understand that when you're touching the bag with your jab, that means they can touch you back. So you only want to stay within punching range for so long. And a good way to work the heavy bag and be very productive with it is to make sure that you're in safely and you're out safely. That way, when you go spar, let's say, your heavy bag training is going to translate a lot more than if you just stood in front of it and got yourself tired with it. And a lot of times people say that the heavy bag makes your eyes lazy, but understand one thing nobody does is they don't put tape markers or implement some kind of accuracy into the heavy bag training. If you place tape markers on the bag, it's going to make the whole thing feel extremely different. Your target is not going to feel so available anymore. And especially if you have a bag that weighs a little bit less or is strung higher, it's going to move a lot. And that distance that you're trying to maintain from an arm's length is going to constantly be changing, which is going to require you to constantly adjust your footwork. Now, moving into the double M bag, you see, you can use focus mitts with a trainer in order to get your accuracy better. And truthfully, a lot of accuracy in boxing and martial arts is just setting up your shots to set yourself up for success when you're actually sparring. However, the double M bag is very good for training yourself to understand the beats per minute and the rhythm of a fight, as well as getting your head off of the center line in a way that you can train anytime you want, anywhere, with very limited resources. So the thing with the double M bag is it actually trains your eyes. You see, a lot of people understand the idea of training your accuracy and your combinations and rhythm, but most people don't consider the fact that your eyes also need training. You see, when you do a double M bag that's 5-inch, it's going to be a lot harder than a double M bag that's 7 inches. However, if you're doing a double M bag that's 5 inches and you're actually looking at a certain point on the bag, it's going to really train your vision and your hand-eye coordination. And then as you get more and more into it, you can even get to the point where you're staring at a very specific part on the bag or even mark the bag yourself. And when you do the double M bag, it's actually a great way to simulate the idea of leading off with a jab, slipping your head from their counter shot, and then going third to counter their counter. And the double end bag is also another thing that you can move all the way around like a 360 if you have the room for it. And that way you're also bringing in your footwork, your head movement, and combinations all in one cohesive pattern. I personally believe and have seen in my own training that when you get very proficient on the double end bag, you get a little bit of a smoothness and an edge that a lot of other people don't really have, or it just takes them a longer time to develop if they've never messed around with one before or put time into training on one. So next, moving into shadow boxing. Now, like I was saying before, most people think of shadow boxing as something you kind of just do in the mirror or you do in an open space before you actually train. And I'm here to tell you that shadow boxing, in a way, might be the only thing you actually need aside from sparring. Now, hear me out. What is the one thing that everyone wants to do when they're in a locker room or in a dressing room before they go out and fight? They throw punches. Now, why is that? It's because throwing punches in the air is the thing that is most similar to what you will actually be doing in a fight. Because the truth is, you do not land every single punch you throw in a fight. Whether you're hitting glove, missing completely, or landing on them, a lot of times you need to learn how to actually miss. But also when you shadow box, it's a great opportunity to move around in an open space and simulate the move that you will actually be moving your feet when you fight. You see, a lot of people get very tired in their first fight, and they always just chalk it up to, oh, I was very nervous and it's overwhelming. But you got to realize that when you're doing mitt work, when you're doing the heavy bag, you're not really moving your feet that much. Where when you do shadow boxing, you can really ramp up the tempo of how many punches you're throwing per minute, how many steps you're taking per minute, and how much you're moving your upper torso and head per movement. And that way, when you do shadow boxing, it really simulates a fight very well. And we know that when we light spar, we're just not throwing at the same intensity that we will be when we're doing hard sparring or a fight. So the way I was saying before that all this stuff is supplementation to your main sparring and mitt work, shadow boxing is the one thing that you should really be doing daily. And it's the best way to simulate an actual fight outside sparring. In my opinion, a little bit more than pad work even in some ways. Also, instead of thinking of shadow boxing as just an exercise, remember that you're not shadow boxing. You're just practicing actual boxing, whether it would be Taekwondo or Muay Thai or dancing or anything like that. It's just you moving your body, doing the same motions that you're going to be doing when you actually get out there and perform your sport. Now, last but not least, I want to talk about jump roping. Now, a lot of times in the new school train of thought, jump roping gets a bad rep, and a lot of people just use it for warm-up, similar to shadow boxing. And I've even seen videos on the internet of guys making these long, drawn-out explanations explaining why jump rope is like considered junk training and doesn't do anything for you. Now, here's what you got to understand. Most people that partake in mixed martial arts or Muay Thai or kickboxing or a lot of other combat sports, they're not always particularly the greatest boxers. Now, why do boxers like jump roping? It's because when you're a great boxer, you usually get very proficient at using a low stance to wrench power into your shots and use good head movement, and also a narrow stance where you can move around the ring very swiftly. And understand that when you get very proficient at jump roping and very skilled at it, it gets your calves to fire and be springy in a certain way that translates directly to when you move around the ring in that tall stance. So I understand and it makes sense to me. If you're someone that doesn't really have great footwork, you don't know how to switch in between the tall and narrow and short power stance, that you wouldn't see the merit in jump roping. But the second you get good at jump roping and you start getting better footwork, when you train them interchangeably, you see how they play off of each other so well. And if you get really good at jump roping from previously not being good at jump roping, when you start moving around the ring, you're going to notice the difference. Don't always listen to these new age guys that say, oh, you need to be sport specific. And if you want to get better footwork, just use footwork and all this different strength and conditioning. I'll be honest, I used to think that way, but it wasn't until I started exploring these older school methods, like getting very good on the jump rope, grabbing the leather rope and getting to work. It transformed my footwork in a way that for 5 years I had pretty stagnant footwork, and it just completely changed it. So I'm here to tell you firsthand experience. You get good at jump roping, you are going to get much more light on the feet and just become an overall better boxer. And don't listen to all these other guys that say otherwise. But there you have it, guys. The main takeaway is that you should be using these old school training methods. And despite what a lot of the new school guys say, they're still relevant and can still help you. You see, a lot of the most famous boxers that we still celebrate today, like Muhammad Ali, Sugar Ray Robinson, Willie Pep, Jack Dempsey, all these guys, Rocky Marciano, they use these methods in an era that didn't have all the new school stuff like we see today.